Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to our explainer on what I absolutely love to call the linguistic physics of systemic functional linguistics, or SFL for short. Now, have you ever actually stopped to wonder what exactly separates a random jumbled pile of isolated sentences from a really powerful unified piece of text? Well, the answer lies in the architecture of meaning, specifically a phenomenon called lexical cohesion. Today, we're going way beyond basic grammar. We are exploring the deep mechanics of how words create this invisible gravitational pull on one another, weaving a tight fabric of meaning across an entire text. For language analysts, cognitive scientists, and linguistic students, mastering this system isn't just some abstract theory. It is literally the key to reverse engineering how humans communicate.
So here is our roadmap for today. We'll be covering 1. The architecture of texture, 2. The general noun bridge, 3. Navigating the cohesive cline, 4. Collocational chains, and 5. Measuring cohesive force. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The architecture of texture. Let's look at what makes a text actually hang together. To understand texture, we have to break it down into two totally distinct systems at the heart of our linguistic architecture. On one side, we have grammatical cohesion. You can think of this as operating through closed systems. I'm talking about finite, hard-coded lists of words, pronouns like he or it, or conjunctions like and because. But on the other side, we have lexical cohesion, and this operates through the infinite, open-ended sets of our vocabulary. It's that cohesive effect achieved purely through the strategic selection of words and their semantic networks. So if grammar gives us the rigid scaffolding of a text, Lexis provides this fluid, infinitely adaptable semantic glue.
Moving on to Section 2, the general noun bridge.
If grammar and Lexis are two totally separate continents, general nouns are the hybrid bridge connecting them. What we're looking at here is a functional taxonomy. General nouns are this really small set of words that have generalized reference within major noun classes. You've got human nouns like person or man, inanimate concrete nouns like thing or stuff, and abstract nouns like matter or idea. What makes these so incredibly fascinating for linguistic analysis is their ability to perform what we call transcategorization. They're essentially shapeshifters. A word like thing can slide all the way across the scale to suit a speaker's precise purpose. It acts like a lexical item because technically it belongs to an open set of vocabulary, but it functions almost entirely like a grammatical pronoun because its meaning is completely dependent on the surrounding text.
Now, what's really interesting is the dual function these general nouns can serve. They aren't just empty placeholders. General nouns frequently carry an interpersonal function, which means they allow the speaker to inject a very specific attitude into the reference. So when someone says the wretched fool or the poor old girl, they are assuming the right to represent the referent based on how it impacts them personally. They're expressing familiarity, sympathy, or maybe contempt. But on the flip side, they can also serve a purely neutral referential function. Think of phrases like the whole thing or talk with the boy. In those cases, there's absolutely no emotional coloring present.
So, you might be wondering, how do we definitively identify a general noun acting cohesively? Well, for language researchers, there is a vital diagnostic tool: tonic prominence. In everyday speech, tonic prominence is just the primary phonetic stress. When a general noun is functioning cohesively, usually when it's accompanied by a pointing word like the, as in the idea, it does not carry the primary stress, even if it sits right at the end of a sentence. This lack of stress is a huge tell. It proves to the analyst that the noun is acting as a presupposing marker pointing backwards in the text, rather than bringing up brand new information.
All right, Section 3, Navigating the Cohesive Cline. Let's see how specificity scales down.
I want you to imagine a visual dial where we are slowly turning down the lexical specificity. Suppose our starting sentence is, "We turn to the ascent of the peak." In step 1, we can refer back to it with a synonym, saying, "The climb was easy." In step 2, we zoom out a bit to a superordinate class. "The task was easy." Step 3, we hit our general word. "The thing was easy." And finally, in step 4, we strip away all lexical meaning entirely and arrive at pure grammar. It was easy. As you move down this cline, the burden of interpretation shifts entirely from the vocabulary itself straight onto the surrounding grammar and preceding text.
This entire sliding scale we just looked at is a process formerly known in SFL as reiteration.
Reiteration ensures that the discourse remains firmly anchored to its established subjects, but it gives the speaker or writer incredible stylistic variety. After all, you don't want to sound like a broken record saying, the jaguar, the jaguar, the jaguar. Instead, you can gracefully pivot to the car, the vehicle, or just the thing.
But SFL theory pushes this concept even further. Lexical items can actually cohere even if they don't share an identical referent. Let's map out these relationships. If I say, there's a boy climbing the tree, and follow it with the boy is going to fall, that is identical reference. But if I say, those boys are always in mischief, that's inclusive. If I say, another boy is standing there, it's exclusively exclusive. Now here's where it gets totally wild. If I say, most boys love climbing, there is zero referential link to that first boy, none at all. Yet, the text maintains perfect texture. Why? Because the pure systemic repetition of the form boy creates a shared environment.
Which brings us perfectly into Section 4, collocational chains and environments.
So if reiteration is about repeating specific concepts, collocation is about mapping the broader magnetic fields of words. Collocation is this cohesive force generated by words that regularly co-occur because they share similar environments. You can think of these as localized weather systems in language. Words pull on one another based on proximity and systemic association. This includes complementarity, like boy and girl, antinomy, like wet and dry, part-to-whole relationships like car and brake, or even an ordered series, like Tuesday and Thursday. The exact logical relationship doesn't even matter as much as the simple fact that their regular proximity in the English language binds the text together.
To really ground this abstract theory in reality, let's examine a famous excerpt from naturalist John Muir titled A Ride on an Avalanche. This dense, beautiful piece of text is an absolute goldmine for language analysts who want to track the physical chains of collocation in action. When we break Muir's text down, we reveal these brilliant, overlapping networks of meaning. Notice how the title, A Ride on an Avalanche, sets the initial environmental condition for the whole piece. From there, distinct semantic chains weave continuously through the sentences. Take a second to look at how they form. We have a mountaineering chain, Yosemite, summit peaks, climb, ridge. We have a time chain, hours, whole day, sundown, sunset. And a movement chain, ride, travel, flight, motion. These chains operate largely independent of the grammatical structure. They act as this invisible lattice, holding the entire narrative together.
And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of instantial meaning. Every single time a word is used, it acquires a unique text history based on its environment. Going way beyond its simple dictionary definition, Muir's specific textual environment dictates the meaning of the word sunset. Because it's flanked by words like hours and sundown, sunset stops being just a generic solar phenomenon and it becomes a time-bound, physical goal that he's actively racing against. This is exactly why context is everything when you are analyzing discourse. The text literally creates its own internal semantic reality.
Finally, Section 5, measuring cohesive force. Let's look at how we quantify all this.
As analysts, we can't just rely on vibes to know if a text hangs together. We need rigorous metrics. Let's visualize a concept called systemic proximity. The strength of a cohesive tie actually depends on the statistical probability of two words co-occurring in the language system. For instance, sunset and sundown exert a very high cohesive force because they are morphologically related near synonyms. They are drawn together super tightly. But compare that to sunset and mountain. Sure, they can exist in the same natural environment, but their systemic proximity in everyday English is much lower, which results in a weaker cohesive force.
Now here is a truly fascinating insight. Another critical factor in cohesive force is overall word frequency. Highly frequent words in English, words like go, man, no, or way, actually provide minimum cohesive tension. Why? Well, because they go with absolutely anything. They are way too generic to bind specific ideas. It is actually the low-frequency, highly specialized words that lock a text together. They restrict the semantic environment and make the discourse predictable and structured. It's a brilliant, beautiful, inverse relationship.
So, if you are analyzing the architecture of a text yourself, here is your practitioner's checklist. First, filter out those high-frequency items unless they are being used in a highly specialized sense. Next, group your morphological variants together, so treat talk, talks, and talking as a single cohesive node. Third, identify doubtful pairs by looking strictly at context, but above all else, leverage your native intuition. Halliday specifically warns analysts not to submerge common-sense linguistic insight beneath the weight of rigid mathematical procedures. The system is incredibly elegant, but it still requires human interpretation.
Which brings us to our final thought. Grammatical cohesion gives you the skeleton, but lexical cohesion, that gives the text its soul, its texture, and its magnetic fields. The next time you analyze a piece of text, remember, you aren't just reading words anymore. You are tracking the hidden physics of meaning. Will you be able to spot the forces holding it all together? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep analyzing, and I'll see you next time.